Nós estamos recebendo aqui nos estúdios da CNN Brasil 3 defensores dos direitos humanos e da liberdade de expressão na Rússia, que tiveram de deixar o país, estão exilados por causa da perseguição do regime Putin. A Tamilla Imanova e o Grigory Vaypan são do Memória, o importante movimento, grupo, organização de defesa dos direitos humanos que ganhou o Prêmio Nobel por causa da sua atuação na Rússia e foi tornado ilegal pelo regime Putin. A Tamilla mora hoje na Polônia e o Grigory em Montenegro. E está aqui com a gente também minha colega Darya Guskova, que é do Media Zone, que também é um importante veículo de comunicação independente da Rússia e, por isso mesmo, também muito premiado e também teve de se exilar. A Darya mora na Lituânia. So, Tamilla, there is this arrest order against Putin, which is part of a context of violation of the human rights, both of Ukrainians and of Russians as well. I wonder if you could explain why there is this arrest order and what's the situation of human rights in Russia.
So I should start with saying that by now, Putin and people who obey him, including Russian army, have committed many war crimes. Russian army has been discriminately bombing children's schools, hospitals, homes where people live, other places of civilian living for more than 2 years now. However, international lawyers cannot afford to be populist, and they started with an accusation that was easiest to prove, because even arrest warrant has to have really good foundation. So the accusation against Putin and another lady, I will talk about her later, is that they have been deporting Ukrainian children forcibly from occupied territories and forcibly giving them new identities. So what is happening, and that is proven by Putin speaking on TV himself, as well as his other authorities. So they deport, or as they would say, save children who are orphaned or whose parents have disappeared from the occupied territories. They bring them to Russian territories. They put them in families. They issue them with new documents with Russian citizenship, and sometimes even with new names, last names of the host family, etc., etc. Another lady who got an warrant arrest together with Putin was a ombudswoman for children's rights, Maria Lvova-Belova. Not only she advocated for this thing to happen, she herself has taken one of such children from Ukraine, placed that child in her own family, and gave this child a new name and last name. So this is illegal under international law, to stripe children of their Ukrainian or any other identity and to basically change their conscience, making them believe they are Russian. Some of them are so little, they might grow up and never remember they were born in Ukraine to Ukrainian parents. They might never even find their parents again. That is very scary, and that's very important that the international community has paid attention to that, among other things.
Mm-hmm. And Grigory, what was the context in which Putin invaded Ukraine? What are the real reasons why he has done that?
Putin has imperial ambitions. He wants to restore the Soviet Union, of which Ukraine was part. Putin doesn't care that Ukraine is an independent state since 1991. It's important to understand that Putin could only begin this war because he suppressed human rights inside his own country, because he built a dictatorship in his own country. He created an atmosphere of fear and terror in which citizens can have no say when it comes to decisions about war and peace. So human rights violations in Russia were key to Putin starting this war, and they're also key to Putin being able to continue this war. Within days after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Putin adopted a number of laws that suppress any kind of anti-war dissent. So these days, if you say no to war in the Russian street, in the street of Moscow or any other city, you'll be arrested and fined. If you wear a T-shirt of colors blue and yellow, those are the colors of the Ukrainian flag, you will be arrested and fined. And if you say things like we say here and you are in Russia, you will likely face prison time.
Darya, what's the environment for journalism in Russia? Is it possible to publish independent news? And what was the situation which took you to move from Russia?
Right now, a huge number of Russian opposition journalists live outside of country because they were forced to leave their country. It's you could be put in prison just because of this fact that you are an opposition journalist in Russia, and it's really important to understand. And every opposition media in Russia now is blocked. You can't have access to their website without using VPN services. VPN services, not too easy. It's not too easy to use VPN services in Russia right now because the apps of VPN services are deleted from Apple Store, from Google Play, because of Russian government and because of companies like Apple and Google. And it's a terrible situation, but we have a few heroes, a few Russian journalists who still are working on the ground, who covered what's going on. And thanks to them, we have a great opportunity to document and to have a big massive of information, I think, for the future and for now, for us to understand what's going on.
Tamilla, did the war make the Russians, at least the Russians who stayed in Russia, to increase their support for the regime?
I think that we're only seeing less and less support of the regime, because before the war, the country has been authoritarian for decades, but it didn't really affect the regular public that much. They didn't really pay attention to what the politicians said or what the human rights defenders said. It was all right. You wouldn't face much of a problem unless you were a political activist. But right now, the regime has become so hungry. They're coming after grandmothers, children, women and men, not only against political activists, but against anyone who dare say their opinion in their private messenger app or in their private post on a Facebook, or even reading the blocked news on their phone in a public place, or singing a Ukrainian song on their party, because, so many Russians have actually Ukrainian roots or Ukrainian ethnicity. So these days, it's more and more of a terror. People are afraid of speaking out the wrong thing. Men are afraid of being conscripted to the war. That's another issue. There is mobilization ongoing in Russia. And soon they will forbid you to leave the country if you have received a conscription letter forcing you to come to the conscription office. So there's many things to be afraid of. There's also a big rising in domestic violence because men come back from the war with PTSD and they commit crimes of violent nature.
Post-trauma,
Yeah. Post-trauma stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in here on this? Putin and his government love to show polls that show Putin's approval ratings skyrocketing. And in most recent presidential so-called election in March of this year, Putin officially got the result of 87% of the vote. Needless to say, we cannot and we should not trust these numbers. Today, there are no free elections in Russia, and even replying to a poll in the street might lead you to being in jail. Just recently, one person got 5 years of imprisonment for speaking to an independent journalist in the street of Moscow and saying things disapproving of the war. So in an authoritarian context, like the one we have in Russia, those polls numbers just do not matter. But what matters is, first of all, fear, second, propaganda, and third, the enormous amount of oil money that Putin has. So he's a smart autocrat that he runs with a combination of these factors. State-run propaganda tells Russians lies every day, and people just don't have access to information that they just might not know what is happening in Ukraine. But also importantly, Putin is using a lot of oil money to fund this war. He's basically bribing Russians to go to this war and kill and get killed. Every single day, Putin spends $300 million on this war. And a huge chunk of this money goes to people who are recruited to fight in the Russian army. Those people mostly come from provincial towns and rural areas. These are people who have lived in poverty their entire lives. Putin has created a system in which so many Russians live in poverty, and then he bribed them to go to war. People take an enormous amount of money as salaries for their service in the Russian military because they see no other opportunity in life.
Darya, do you think that Russians are prepared or would like to live in a democratic country after Putin?
I believe that they really want, but maybe they just, a lot of Russians don't have this experience, you know. For example, my generation, we don't know. Generation of my mother, they don't know. But we believe in it. And I think this fact that I'm an independent journalist, my colleague, human rights defenders, I think we believe in democracy. And there are a lot of Russians like us.
How much percent do you think of Russians are getting independent news?
As I know, the number is about 20% of Russian population, and I think it's a huge number. Of course, we have a lot of work, but it's the people who who already read independent media, but we have a huge part of people who somewhere in the middle, and if the person doesn't have strong opinion, it's a place for working.
Do they need VPN to get independent information?
Yes, but not only. And my colleagues, I mean Mediazona and other independent journalists, we try to work in different formats.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are blocked in Russia, but we have Telegram. It's the most popular messenger for Russian-speaking audience. And in Telegram, you have your own medias, and lots of Russians get news from the Telegram. And we have YouTube. It isn't blocked. It's slowed down in Russia. You still can use it without VPN services. And it's a place where we are working hard. Mm-hmm. Telegram and YouTube.
Alexei Navalny used YouTube.
Yeah. I think he built this whole identity thanks to YouTube.
Tamilla and Grigory Memorial has a plan for establishing democracy in Russia after Putin. What's that plan?
We have a project called 100 Days After Putin. It's a project that maps out possible reforms that a post-Putin government might want to take in order to make Russia a democratic and rule of law country. We have to acknowledge that sustainable peace in our part of the world, in Eastern Europe, depends not on just ending the war in Ukraine, but reforming Russia. Key to change in our part of the world lies inside Russia. Russia will continue to be a threat to international peace and security unless it becomes a democratic rule of law state. And for that, we believe whenever Putin leaves office, however that might happen, for that, there will be a very short time span. In our own history, in the history of post-Soviet Russia, there was a moment in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. It was just a very short period of 4 months when there was some space for meaningful liberal reforms. And that chance has not been used. So now we think we should not miss on this opportunity. And we see there are 3 key areas in which we need to come up with proposals for first steps. Those are, first of all, just peace with Ukraine, which means complete withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian territory, reparations to Ukraine, and return of Ukrainian prisoners of war, Ukrainian civilians arbitrarily detained in Russia, and of course Ukrainian children. Second, creating a space for free elections to take place in Russia. And for that, we would need to remove all restrictions that we have now in Russian laws that not allow people to run for office, that not allow people to create political parties, that do not allow people to hold public rallies, to advocate for their cause. And finally, is the issue of the final issue is the issue of accountability. And that is the most important one, we believe. We need to hold accountable those members of the current regime that are responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine, but also for crimes against Russians themselves, crimes that the regime has committed for 2.5 decades. It's important that people are brought to account, they're held criminally responsible, that the victims are compensated. But most importantly, we need to dismantle the structures of terror that have existed in Russia for so long. The state security apparatus is ruling Russia these days. We need to make sure that those people are not able to hold government positions, and those bodies themselves cease to exist because they've tainted themselves. Their reputation is tainted. And we need to build the law enforcement system in Russia from scratch. We need to build the Russian judiciary from scratch. And basically, the entire system of government must be founded on new principles.
Tamilla, is there an elite or a middle class of Russians who would support a democratic project in Russia?
Yes, there absolutely is. And even more than that, I think even working class would support different conditions. We can see that so many of the political prisoners, of people who have been caught for speaking out their mind, they are regular milk farmers in the rural regions. They are the teachers. They are the truck drivers. So many people dislike what's going on for various reasons. For instance, for the reason of poverty growing and growing. Just today, ruble has fallen even lower than ever before. There is a new record of ruble national currency falling. Some people just cannot understand how Russia dares to kill their relatives, because so many Russians have Ukrainian relatives. This is two neighboring countries who have been marrying each other for centuries. Other Russians do not understand the censorship. They might have heard about it from the Soviet times, but nowadays, especially if we're speaking about young people, they just do not get why someone should tell them what to do and what to think and what to post online. So we are the rebels. We do not like that. We don't want to be silenced. So many reasons to dislike what's going on, so many reasons to oppose the war, the Putin regime, the absolutely ineffective judicial system, police system, current economy. So many things have gone wrong. So I am very sure that all classes of current society would support changes for different reasons.
Tamilla, muito obrigado por essa entrevista. Spasiba.
Obrigada.
Grigory, muito obrigado por essa entrevista. E Darya também, minha colega, obrigado.